Hello, welcome to Entirely English. Nice to see you here. A special welcome to Sam Holden and Göran Turd. I'm not sure if that's how that's pronounced or if that's a joke name. Do pop some information in the comments and let me know about you. And if you are a new subscriber like Sam and Göran, then please put some information in the comments so I know, because YouTube doesn't always tell me. Okay, on to today's video. Today we are looking at the difference between American and British words for fruit and vegetables. Most of this video will be images, so you know what I'm talking about and you don't have to look at this ugly mug. So let's begin with eggplant in America, aubergine in Britain. In Britain, we use the derivative of the French name, and America uses a word that describes what it looks like. Eggplant, apparently. The next one, a common one, in Britain we have courgettes, and in America they have zucchinis. Again, this goes back in time to choice. We chose the French word courgette, and the US chose the Italian word zucchini. So I have no idea if we had these vegetables in Britain before they left on the Mayflower. Possibly not. Possibly. But anyway, these are the differences. Let's not argue about them. Now, this is an interesting one. In Britain, we have marrows. These are, I'm told, giant zucchinis. And in America, they would call them giant or overgrown or mature zucchinis. In Britain, marrows are very popular, and you have marrow competitions. Here you can see a picture of a certain parliament member with his prize-winning marrow. Apparently, so I've learned, in America they don't set out to grow marrows, but if a zucchini, as they call it, does happen to have grown, maybe the farmer's away for a week and they come back and find this overgrown zucchini, they don't throw it away. I was interested to learn about this. If American farmers don't intend to grow marrows, what do they do with them? Do they throw them away? Apparently, while commercial grocery stores won't sell them, overgrown zucchinis can be used in the home. So they make zucchini bread, what they call zucchini boats, where they slice the giant zucchini lengthwise, hollow it out in the middle, and make a boat and stuff it with a heavy mixture of minced beef or Italian sausage, things like that, and then covering it in cheese and baking it. Incidentally, I have done the same with courgettes. It's very tasty. And they also make fritters with them, and they make what they call zucchini relish. They chop it up with onions and green peppers and make a jarred condiment used on hot dogs, so a relish. And they also have this trick. They make what they call a fake apple pie or trick apple pie.
Looks like apple pie, even smells like apple pie. But it's not apples, it's zucchini.
Apparently, there's a running joke in suburban and rural America that during August you have to lock your car doors, not to keep thieves out, but to stop your neighbors from sneakily leaving a giant unwanted marrow on your front seat because they've grown too many. Okay, that's enough about marrows and zucchinis. Let's move on to bell peppers. Americans call them bell peppers. We just call them peppers. Red pepper, yellow pepper, or green pepper. Also, we use the word pimento, but for what Americans call bell peppers, we generally call red peppers, but there are the greens and yellows as well. And then we have rocket lettuce in Britain, which the Americans call arugula. Then we have cos lettuce, and the Americans call it romaine lettuce. And then we have chicory. I first became aware of chicory when I was a child, and my father bought chicory as a substitute for coffee. It was disgusting. The Americans call it endive, so you have an endive salad. Then we have spring onions, these smaller, green, sweeter, more pleasant onions. The Americans call them scallions or green onions. And we have swede, this root vegetable, and the Americans call it a rutabaga, which I always thought was an American car. But there you go. We have beetroots. The Americans just call them beets, but you can't beat a beetroot. Now we have delicious broad beans. The Americans call them fava beans. Cute Anthony Hopkins. We have butter beans, also extremely delicious. The Americans call them lima beans. We have chickpeas, and they call them garbanza bean. And this one's quite confusing. We have French beans and runner beans, which apparently the Americans call green beans, and string beans, but we also have string beans and green beans. So we've got 4 classes of those. It looks like the Americans just have the 2 types. Now we have one which became popular, I suppose, in the 80s in Britain, which is mange tout, coming from the French, meaning to eat all. And the Americans call it snow peas. Essentially, peas still in the pod before they're properly mature. They are tasty, but it's a bit suspicious because you don't know what larva had been planted inside. Then we have haricot beans, which are the ones which we commonly use to make baked beans. And the Americans call them navy beans. Here's one that's a bit confusing as well. Gherkin. This is a pickled young cucumber. Something from the cucumber plant. I'm not convinced it is cucumber, but there you go. The Americans call it a pickle. Now, gherkins are pickled, but when you say pickle in Britain, it refers to like their relish, this stuff you put onto your salads or your sandwiches. The most popular one in Britain being Branston pickle. Very good condiment. Now, if we move on from there to herbs, we find that many of the herbs do have the same name, but they have very noticeable differences in pronunciation. So in fact, you can hear it there. Our first difference in pronunciation is in Britain, we say herbs. We pronounce the H, herbs. Whereas in America, they say herb, for some reason, dropping the H.
A few herbs really are more difficult to.
Now we have basil. In American, they pronounce it basil. But it's basil, like the person's name, Basil.
With him. Really, Andre, he's wonderful.
This Basil's wife. This Basil. This smack on head.
A sage is pronounced the same in both countries generally. Obviously, there's regional dialects in both countries which change these things, but generally, sage is pronounced the same in both. The difference is in the use. When you say sage in Britain, it's often heavily associated with stuffing. This sage and onion and breadcrumb mix, which you put inside your Christmas turkey or your chicken when you cook it. Whereas in America, it's famously the herb that is used in the most popular sausages, breakfast sausages. One we hear quite a lot is oregano. In America, they say oregano. Oregano, oregano. And then we have rosemary. As you can hear in Britain, we say rosemary, and the Americans pronounce it rosemary. Exactly as it's written. But if you give a girl that name, you'd call her Rosemary. A cayenne pepper is an interesting one because there's kind of different regulations between Britain and America. In the UK, chili powder is pure 100% ground chilies. And it sits next to the cayenne pepper, which is 100% pure ground cayenne chilies. Main difference is the flavor and the heat, obviously. Whereas in the US, chili powder is never pure ground chilies. It's always a pre-made spice blend containing mild chilies mixed with cumin, garlic powder, oregano, or oregano, as they would say, and salt. Americans use it primarily to make a pot of chili con carne. So if an American recipe calls for chili powder and you put in pure UK chili powder, your dish will end up incredibly hot. Now, don't take this as me being biased. This was from an AI while I was doing some research, and it's about allspice. I believe that it's pronounced the same in both countries, but apparently it causes confusion for many Americans because they think it's a blend of spices, whereas actually a single distinct berry named allspice because it tastes like a mixture of cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves. So allspice is not a blend of all spices. It is one particular spice. And we have the herb coriander, which the Americans call cilantro. Interesting fact, the Americans call the fresh herb cilantro, but the dried herb is called coriander, whereas in Britain both are coriander. All right, so let's move on to fruit. Now we have cantaloupe, not so different as you might think. In Britain, cantaloupe melon. This differentiates it from the honeydew melon, the Gallia melon, the other types of melon, whereas the Americans just call it a cantaloupe. We have white grapes. The Americans call them green grapes, apparently, but I've always called them green grapes. Now we have prunes in the UK, very popular 50 or so years ago for curing constipation. In America, they don't call them prunes, they call them dried plums. They used to call it a prune, apparently, but the American marketers lobbied to officially rename them dried plums because the word prune had an old-fashioned reputation. This constipation cure, I guess. When it comes to the small, easy peel oranges, we have Satsumas, clementines, mandarins, tangerines. There's a whole list of them. The Americans tend to categorize them as mandarin and tangerines or just easy peelers. But in Britain, they're separated into smaller categories because of the different types, the different flavors, the different sweetnesses. Now, in Britain, we do have blueberries, just like they do in America. Those are the glossy, plump blueberries that you find in supermarkets in both countries, called blueberries. However, smaller, wild, deeply stained berries, which are native to Britain, look the same but much smaller, are called bilberries. They are technically different from blueberries, look very similar, smaller, and a sharper taste. And finally, we're looking at the ultimate crossover between fruit and vegetable. We all think of it as a vegetable, but according to the scientists and botanists, it is a fruit. We're talking about the tomato. Now, we're not even going to discuss the genetic modification of these things, like the apple. In America, apples are so much bigger than in Britain because ours are not genetically modified. Same with the tomatoes. But in America, they tend to say tomato or tomato. Tomato. And we say tomato. Ma rather than me.
Tomato.
Tomato. Tomato. Tomato. I suppose that's wrong as well because generally they don't pronounce the T, so it'd be tomato. Go.
Apparently China said to Trump, don't turn the North Korean president from dictator to martyr. And Trump said, we say tomato.
I hope that was an interesting walk through a supermarket with me, looking at the fruits and vegetables. The next one, I think, will complete this series. We're going to look at dairy produce because that can be very interesting and confusing. All right. If you have any comments, pop them below. If you know any other fruits and vegetables I've missed out, pop them below as well. If you're a new subscriber, pop some information about yourself below and do come back next time. Thanks for joining me. See you again. Bye-bye.